And we've talked about this before. And here's the thing. Here's how this applies to us. Cool. So how's it going, everybody? We're in another week, another time period where life is weird. It's just weird. And we're just going to soldier through now, aren't we? There are some issues, lots of sadness, but there are also some little gifts that we're getting, as sparkly and as small as they might be. We're going to take them, any gift that we can get through this time. Okay, so here's the deal. Today, I don't want to scare you. I really don't. But I want to give you a little bit of a challenge and something to think about. No pressure, because I don't want to put any pressure on any human being right now, because we all have it in spades. I would just like to introduce an idea to you to pack away for future consideration, to ponder, but to not overthink on. So we'll get into that content about what that's going to be about. And I am going to give you an assignment. And as always, my new tradition is to give you a bad joke at the end. So stay for the end, because it's a bad joke this week. So we do. Okay. So here's the thing. Let's get serious, shall we? We as creative people, in some fashion, we are trying to piece together, or are piecing together, a creative living in some way. And it's our portfolio. We have established a portfolio, not what we normally think about a portfolio, which is our actual artwork or writing in a single space, that's a single place that someone could look at, like, this is my art portfolio. But our portfolios of what we do, that, like a stock portfolio, so I've heard, the reason you have a stock portfolio is that sometimes stocks go up and sometimes they go down, sometimes they plummet, sometimes they rise. But you should always be in some sort of balance, and that's why you have a portfolio of stocks. That is why we should have a portfolio of skills to deliver to the world, particularly when the world might not participate in our actual goals and how we can sort of piece this together. So when we look at our wider portfolio, you all know what you do. You might have a POD shop, you might have an Etsy shop, you might have a side biz that has nothing to do with this creative gig we talk about. You might have a part-time job, or you might write books, you might coach, you might teach. So that is the portfolio of your skills and your gifts that you bring to the world. That is the portfolio of your business. I want to introduce an idea to you. Like I said earlier, this is not to put pressure on you, or this is not a thing that you should be doing necessarily to grow. I'm just wanting you to think about this as an option and to see how it could build your portfolio of the things that you are offering the world. Now, as I mentioned last week and the week before and the week before, we don't know what the next month, 3 months, 6 months is going to look like in what we have normally been doing. So my thought has been, so what do I got? What are the things that I got that I can pretty much do from this chair? What are the things that I can either enhance, add to, or what are the things that I have that are not relying on somebody else's decisions? What are those things that I can continue to bring out to the world? So I have been thinking about that, and I've been thinking about that for you as well. And here's the thing. Remember, no pressure to perform. There is no pressure for anyone to perform during this time. There will be time for performance later, but right now, whatever you can do, do. If you don't want to, don't. It'll find its place. You know that thing they always talk about, like how much you can, I'm not going to go there. Some professor, like how many rocks can you put in a jar, and then you pour the sand on, then you pour the water on, blah, blah, blah. So you can always fill your bucket. Someone else knows that story. It's beautiful, just not in the way that I am telling it. Okay, so I'm just going to give you 3 little words as an option. You should publish. You should publish. Now, let me go through what this means to me and what this could mean for you. Now, publishing can mean a lot of different things. Publishing could mean putting out blog posts. Publishing can mean actual books. Publishing can mean putting out YouTube videos. But I think publishing in some form can be a real builder for the things that you can, that you are not contingent on other people's decisions, because you have taken the decision to publish. So let me explain this, of how it worked for me and what the stepping stones were for me of how publishing has sort of worked well in this whole thing. Okay, so I self-published. Well, okay, years ago. Oh, they're up there. See those little children's books right there, Ready for Bed? Those I did. That was the first children's book I ever did, and they were with an actual New York publisher, which was super cool. And those are very old. And that was like my first deal in publishing. We're doing those 2 children's books because I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I did that, and it was awesome. And they sold for 10 minutes, and then they didn't. And then I went a different direction and didn't really go back to that. So technically, the other first book that I published, and you may have it, and this is not to pitch my books. These are for examples only. Okay, my first book was Licensed to Draw, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart if you bought it. And it was really, it's a book. It still sells. I still sell some every day. It's basically the nuts and bolts of what the art licensing business looks like. This is the step-by-step, this is how you do it. This is the handbook, if you will. And the reason I wrote this was Jim and I were Two Town Studios at the time. We were agents, and we got a lot of questions about, so how does this work? And I'm like, I'm going to write a book. And the last book that had been published was one that we all also have on our shelf. I forget what it's called. I have it right over there. But it's a great book. But it was written in like 1994 was the last time it was published. And I was like, I think it's time for an update. So in 2013, I wrote and published this book. Now, the writing took longer than I ever thought it would because I'd never written a book before. The publishing, there was a lot of swearing because I had never self-published a book before, but I clunked my way through it and I published a book. This is the 2nd edition because I hated the first cover. Anyway, and I updated some stuff in this. So anyway, I wrote this in 2000, wrote and published the first version of this in 2013, which is great. So that was my first book. My second book I published in 2014, which is Gruesome Greetings, which is a cozy mystery about a woman who's a greeting card artist, and it takes place in a rather well-known, particularly right now, convention center in the middle of Manhattan. So I wrote this book. Because I really wanted to get the information out, and I kind of had to write it. This book, I really wanted to write because I always wanted to write like a novel. I like cozy mysteries, and I'm like, I'm going to write one of those things. Okay, that's really hard. So anyway, writing this book, I learned a whole lot more about how to produce a book, how to do all the technical parts of it. It was easier for me to do because I had done it at least once before, and I had figured out like how to do it technically with not as many YouTube videos as the first time around. So in 2015, the coloring book craze hit. And I don't know about you guys, but when there are times in your life when you have this moment where you go, I can do that. And here's the reason. I knew I could do the artwork because I've been drawing since the dawn of time. And I had a ton of black and white artwork because I'd done 4 million rubber stamps up to that point. So, but because I had already had the experience of publishing these 2 books, this is not the first book, but this is an example of, I established the Coloring Cafe, and I have published like 20 more coloring books. Because I could respond to the market super fast, like, oh, there's coloring books happening out there. I can draw one and I know I can publish it. So the publishing on that one was like piece of cake. because I had 2 books under my belt and I knew how to do the thing to publish them. Okay, so that sort of launched the whole coloring cafe part of my business. And because I had had that experience, I was poised to respond, to be able to do that. I didn't have to go, well, how do you publish a book? How do I do that? How do I do that? And then you'd kind of lose the momentum, or you would lose the market share because you didn't have the skills to do that, which is why I'm telling you to publish now when no one's paying attention. But we'll get to that. Okay, so I was prepared. Now, by doing those things, it led me to a couple of things. One is I have a baseline income, not a huge income, not a live-on income, but there is a baseline income because for not a lot of effort on my part, those things are just selling because they're all print on demand through Amazon, and they just keep selling, and they can sell forever. That first coloring book has sold almost 10,000 copies, which is shocking. But that's over a course of, I mean, that's 5 years. So they just keep going. They keep going. But so that led me to some sort of a baseline income that's not greatly reliable, but enough that you go, yeah, I kind of know where the baseline is. It also brought me, that experience brought me to 3 different more traditional publishers. One was a coloring book publisher that we did a bunch of books together while the market was super hot. And that was fantastic because they were able to get me into retail, but I never would have met those people or gotten a deal like I got with them without having done this part. That also led me to a conversation with a different publisher that ended up with 2 books with this other publisher. These are fill-in journals. You've seen Gratitude with Attitude, which is the fill-in gratitude journal. And then this book is another fill-in journal called Start Here, Start Now, Start Anywhere, which is a fill-in journal prompts about starting something new. So this is brand new on the market. So I don't think I would have gotten these deals without having done that part myself. Okay. The other thing that publishing did for me, particularly publishing the License to Draw book, is it established me, even though I'd been an agent for years and an art director and a licensed illustrator, it brought me sort of some credentials and credibility to, apparently she knows something. And so that led to sort of the teaching, coaching part of my world. So you can see how just by saying, I'm going to publish a book, that could be the little axis that the world might pivot on for you. Okay, so that's the thing. Okay, so that is the why to publish, that it can open some doors, like little creaky doors could open because of that activity. Okay, now here's the sort of the why for you and the what and the how, briefly. Okay, books can be all kinds of things. Books can be informative, they can be entertaining, or they can be super useful. Like the guided journals can be super useful for a person to help either understand something more deeply, to journal about something they're concerned about, to sort out their thoughts, or to help them move their business forward, something like that. Books can be super useful for people. And I know that many of you, if not all of you, have the ability to either be informative, entertaining, or useful. And somehow that can be massaged and produced into a book in some way. I know this. Don't talk back to me. I know this for sure. And in previous Coffees with Ronnie, we have talked about sort of the intersection of your knowledge, your skills, and your interests and passions. Like, if you can throw all those things together, that intersection is where your book lives. So just keep thinking about that. That is where a book can live, is that intersection between your knowledge and experience, your skills, your abilities to produce something, to move that thing forward, and your passions for your life, whether it's art or canning or knitting or auto mechanics or whatever it is. There's this intersection of the things that you can do to move something else forward. Okay, so books really can take the form of the how-to. How do you do the thing? How do you knit? How do you change the oil in a car? How do you become an artist? It can be the feelings and opinions around something. This is how I feel about being a mother. This is how I feel when I've experienced loss in my life. This is how I feel the crazy stuff that happened when I worked for, a major bank in New York. I didn't do that. But the feelings and opinions around things, your political opinions, your faith opinions, your faith beliefs, all of that stuff can be massaged into a book. Or it can be a true doing type book, which would be a workbook that you are actually walking someone through steps to do something. So they can take the format of how to do something, your thoughts and opinions on things, and also on the actual helping someone actually do the thing that you were teaching them to do. Okay, so there are options of how you can get this stuff out on the world. Now, all of mine are done through KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, which is a super confusing title because it used to be CreateSpace. So if you hear the word CreateSpace out there, that entity does no longer exist. It's now Kindle Direct Publishing, or KDP. And that is, I think it's confusing because Kindle is associated in our brains with ebooks, and these are actual print books. These are actual printed books. So, but all of my books that I end up with a physical book are done through KDP, except for the ones I've worked with publishers. Okay. So that can be a book. I've done just straight on journals. I did a series of just blank journals to sort of test the market. Oh, I wrote in that one. Shall I read it aloud? Dear diary. No. Anyway, so you can do just straight on journals, but there's ways that you can do this. Then you can a book is also like a PDF download from your website. If you just want to do a book how-to or some sort of workbook, or something that's associated with a class that you're doing, you can just have it be a PDF that gets delivered on your website, or a PDF that you're selling on Etsy. That is still a book. It's exchanging information with your audience. And now there's not completely new, but there's this kind of new concept to me. It's called a Kindle short read. And what it is, it's a Kindle book, but it's sort of like not big enough to be a book, but bigger than a pamphlet and bigger than a blog post. So they consider a short read to be something that someone would read between 30 minutes and an hour. So some people do the short read concept of like a serialization of a novel that they're writing, like a romance novel, and you kind of deliver it in chapters to people. But they're usually sort of standalone or like a short story format. And then there are people that are doing the short reads as just, this is information. This is information that you should know. And I just did one. And here's the reason I did it. As I was saying earlier, when I was thinking about, okay, here we are in a world that we don't recognize completely, looks kind of familiar, but not. What are the things that I have that I can deliver to the world from my chair, from here? And I was thinking about, and this is a clue, write this down. I have, I teach on Skillshare, and I have a Skillshare class called Getting Clients, and it's a 5x5 plan for getting clients. And some of the people I've coached have used this method. I've used this method to sort out how to get more clients. Mostly for me, it was in the licensing side of things. So I have this Skillshare class. I think it's a marvelous class. It's short, it's succinct, it's a great system, and it does okay on Skillshare. But I kept thinking, not everybody's on Skillshare. What is a different way that I can deliver this? Because I didn't feel like it was like a big enough class or concept that it could be like a full-blown course, that I could sell somewhere else. And then I thought, oh, this is the perfect Kindle short read because it's really good information. I already have it outlined. I know the material. I'm just going to string this together in a narrative and get this going into a Kindle short read. So I just published that. And here's the beautiful thing. Okay. It took us a few weeks to kind of get that organized. Jim, thankfully, is my editor. And did the cover and got it all organized, and I uploaded it yesterday at like 3 o'clock, and it said it would be up to 72 hours. And I got an email that yesterday evening at like 9 o'clock saying your book's published. I'm like, cool. So it's on the market. So there are ways to, like, a book doesn't have to be like the next 5 years of your life or the biggest, greatest thing ever. It can be a really succinct, useful, important work that doesn't have to be overthought and overwrought and take you forever to do it. It can be a really concise, wonderful thing to put out on the market. Yes, Kelly, PDFs on Etsy. Yeah, depending on where your audience is. And of course, we've talked about this a lot. Placing it in front of your potential buyer is the key. It's not the easy part, but it's key. But you'll never get in front of those people if you don't do anything. Sherry, I used to work in the financial sector, figuring out how that intersects with artists, overwhelmed by information about this particular area, but getting there. How to break it all down into easy to understand info is where I'm a bit stuck. Yes, here's the thing. Now, this was, again, not a promo, but I think I'm going to make this. I do have a class, and I was going to mention this later. I'll just mention it now. I do have a class on Skillshare on how to publish low and no content books, like journals and workbooks and sketchbooks. And so if you're on Skillshare, there is that class that it's the sort of the nuts and bolts of how to follow along uploading on KDP. But I also have a beginning part of that is about sort of how to figure out your book topic. But I want to go deeper into that front end, like what is your book and how do you figure out what it is and what's your delivery system and all that. So if you think that's a cool class, let me know. Karen, love that class. You published your first book that way. Yay! Karen Wolcott, I want to publish a small book of encouragement you would give to a friend going through divorce. I overwhelm myself. I already start to work on it. Oh, totally understand. Now, I'm just going to give you it is not easy because we have a million thoughts. Okay, here's my three methods. Just your standard outline. The way you learn to outline a term paper in 7th grade. Topic, what am I going to talk about in each of these sections? What do people have to know? So you have to just kind of like do that. I'll go deeper, but the basic outline is the basic outline. That does not change whether you're talking about, the pioneers in Oklahoma in 18 whatever from 7th grade or your book on helping people through divorce. I mean, it's an outline. The other thing is index cards. I think I showed you this one time that I have a box of index cards that is a book that I am working on, and every thought, every concept goes on an index card, and then you can start shuffling them into chapters. So you're basically outlining like that. The other thing when I get tighter on a book is putting that stuff on Post-it notes, and then you can start to move things around and have a visual idea of where you're going with this. And then sometimes things just have to go away and you just pull off the Post-it note. No big deal. Again, no pressure. No one's grading you. And so in that process, so it's a little messy, but those are the things I kind of like to go into deeper if you guys are interested in that topic. So the Kindle short reads is a really interesting idea. And, so I took the content that I had from that Skillshare class and made it into a book. The License to Draw book, this book became my outline for the Skillshare class. So you can see how things can go back and forth. Like if you were doing a book of encouragement, Karen, on encouraging people when they've gone through a divorce or a big life change, books often, and this is what I mean by opening that door, books can sometimes become workshops, books can become other books, books can become classes. I mean, so there's a lot of things, and that's why I want to position this for you guys to say, give this a thought, because we all have had a life. We have all have had experiences that could help another person. And because we're sort of in this creative business, most of us have the chops to figure out how to produce it. You know, you have that capability. Let's just put it this way, if I can do it, you can do it. Okay. Now, so what kind of things could you publish? You could publish a memoir. You know, you had a unique experience that you think would help other people. An illness, you were held hostage. I don't know what that was, but I mean, memoirs are really great to understand and experience and to understand how they process things. Personal essays, you know, Irma Bombeck, if you're old enough to remember Irma Bombeck, wrote funny columns about motherhood and domestic life in a column, and those turned into books. So you could write personal essays that you put all together on a certain topic and you publish it as essays. If you're a poet, you could do that. You could do a poet. Okay, I'm just going to say this right now. KDP is not the place to do a color book, but for the topic of what we're talking about, that's another subject. But you could do, if you wrote poetry and you do line artwork, that could be a lovely little gift book. Sometimes a book can be something that you don't necessarily will make a bunch of money on, and probably you won't, but it can sort of be a platform for other things that can happen to you. And it can also be it can be a fundraiser. It can be a lovely gift. It can be just like, I wanted to write a book and I wrote a book. And that's good enough for me. Okay. You could also, so like I said, like the journal I did, you could do guided journals. You could help someone, say you're raising chickens, like I assume you have to like log, you know, when they eat or poop or whatever. But like if you do something that other people don't do, you could help them with a journal to help them manage the thing that you all do, recording the patterns that you sewed, you know, those kinds of things. Like what size did you wear, and you know, all of that stuff. That is really cool. You could produce a recipe book, either your own for sale, for a family event. The book is something that can easily together on KDP. And then of course, all the how-to guides you could do. So those are just some ideas. Again, don't get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed, because one of those you're going to say, oh, that's a cool idea. Let me think about that one. Try not to overthink, because this whole thing about everybody has a book in them. Okay. Two things. One is, I believe that's true. Sometimes they're really bad books. And so you want to make sure that you are doing enough to get your message across. You want it to be clean. You want it to be decently written. You want it to be well edited with no typos or funky grammar, whatever. But you don't have to write the book of all time. You can start, and that's the beauty of starting with a small book, something really simple. Like those coloring books, that was a fantastic process of planning, doing the art, getting it through. And so try not to be overwhelmed. Try to pick something that is manageable for you. Just try not to overthink it, which is like a giant ask. Mine your life or interests. If there's something that you are just passionate about, and the way you know, this is how you get a clue on that, is when you know that you could talk for hours about something. And other people, like most of the people around you, their eyes are glazing over, but you are super passionate about it. Somebody else is too. And that makes it an easier book to write when you know that you can talk about it for hours. That is a clue that that's the book that you should probably write. The other one is when it's more in that sort of how-to area, or something that's informative, is what do people ask you about all the time? Hey, how do you raise chickens? Live a life in the country? How do you check it all and disappear? I saw a class one time on how to check it all and disappear. But you might know that, and somebody else wants to know that. If there is a topic that you like just can't stop talking about to the point where other people in your life are like, I don't want to talk about that anymore, that's what you should write. You recommended a book a few years ago about tips about writing memoirs that was excellent. I read it then, but cannot remember the name of the author. It's called The Memoir Project. I don't remember the author's name, but honestly, if you want to write memoir, Kathleen, wink, wink, that is you should read that book. It's a real small book, but it's very, very good. And I will link that in if you just don't see it on Amazon, but it's called The Memoir Project, and it's very good. The book covers for EP, Heather wants to know, come out fine, right? I'm quite happy with them. Again, if you are like, if your world has revolved around offset printing like mine did for many years, you kind of be like, yeah, that's not really the color. But it's fine. It's fine. Think of it as a high quality color copy. And these, you can get them gloss or matte. I prefer the gloss. And they're fine for what you're doing. You just have to lower your expectations a little bit and push your color enough. Like I would love for this pink to be more of a hot pink. That's just not going to happen, because if you know anything about offset printing, that would probably be a fifth color anyway. So it's kind of impossible to even get that. So just deal. But they're good enough. They're good enough. Yeah, the covers are fine. I have a friend who's sort of doing a ton of journals right now because she has a large amount of artwork on a specific subject, and she has an eye, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know about these covers." And I'm like, I looked at them like, they are fantastic. They really are great, and most people are not seeing, they're not seeing this compared to my computer screen. I mean, they're not seeing, like if you're doing an illustration, they're not seeing it against it. It's fine. Assignment. I'm not going to give you the assignment that you need to publish a book. That is way too big of an assignment and way too much responsibility on my part. I am going to ask you to sit down, possibly this afternoon, and I want you to write down the 10 books you could write. Yeah, there are 10 books that you could write. Just write down, you don't have to write down anything more about them except the 10 books that you could write. Like when I was thinking about teaching, I'm like, so what could I teach? And we talked about this before in the Desperate Times Call for Desperate Measures. And when you think about the things that you could do, there's a lot of things you could do. And so write down 10 things that you could write a book about. Maybe it's how to make soup. Maybe it's how to crochet granny squares into 47 different items. And I do want a granny square vest at some point in my life. But I want you to write down 10 books that you could write, and don't overthink it. Just write down whether it's about being a creative professional or not, whether it jives with your illustration dreams or your writing dreams. Write down 10 things that you could write about. That's all. That's it. But there's something there. There is something there. And here's the beautiful part. It is the beginning of something. It is not like, I wrote a book. It is the be all and end all of my life. Now, TikTok, check that off the list. Although it's really good to check something off the list. So yes, think about that. That's why I'm asking you to just brainstorm 10 things that you could write about. I could probably brainstorm on some of you 5 of the things to write about, but this is your assignment, not mine. Marketing the book. Okay, I think I told you guys this story. I'll tell it again. I bought this Kindle book for like $2.49, which is like how to make $40,000 in a weekend on Kindle books. Something along those lines. And basically, and I'm so happy that I read it. I think I read that book before I wrote License to Draw. And basically it was like, if you want to do this for money, do not put one word on the paper until you know who you are talking to. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to other people that have been through the experience that you went through? Are they other artists that want to do what you do? Are they, usually memoir or books are not about, I'd like to tell you about my fabulous life. Unless, of course, you're, I don't know, had a fabulous life like Joan Rivers or something and people would care. Most of us are not that. So you really have to have a reason for writing and you have to have an audience that you are writing to. When I wrote Gruesome Greetings, the novel, I knew exactly who I was writing this for. I was writing this for you. I was writing this so we could have fun about the business of being an illustrator and we could have fun about a trade show that actually does not turn out as well as we would like it to. So I knew when I was writing it, I was writing it exactly for you. So that's the beginning part. You start with who am I writing this for and why am I writing it for them? And then you can pick that up and go, now I know where those people are. I know where they hang out. I know where they live. But it's never easy. The marketing part is the hardest part. And that's just a whole other animal. This is an option. This is something that I don't want to put one more thing on your plate. If you don't want to do a book, don't do a book. But it's that simple. I'm just saying that sometimes times like this are the time when you say, I'm going to do that. And you find the other things that you go, I don't need to do that. And you kick that something else to the curb for something that you really want. So this is, I'm hoping, I mean, yes, I get excited and yes, I am totally see how this can help somebody pivot to something new that they didn't know about. But I hope I am not putting pressure on you to do that. No. Do whatever you want. Joke. It's a writing joke this week. Here's your bad joke for the week. Why didn't Shakespeare write in pencil? I'm not for answers. Why didn't he write in pencil? Because he couldn't decide between to be or not to be. I am so sorry. Okay, you guys, I'm ending my live video. And Facebook, finally. But we will talk soon. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay as your marvelous, adorable selves, and stay caffeinated, as always. Take care. Bye.